Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're staying curious. Look at this motley crew that assembled here on launch weekend. This is so wonderful that our museum has Carlton Bailey here today. We got John Tilko, one of our new friends of the museum here, and of course Mark Usciak, whose brother Tom. We're launch photographers at the shuttle, just like Carlton here. And we're so grateful that all three of you support our museum in different ways. First time we've had John on here. Good to have you on here, John.
Thank you.
All three of you here for the crewed launch, right?
Right.
That's right. That's it.
That's right. John, tell us a little bit about where you came from for this launch today.
Oh, from Boston. I've been following this mission for quite a while. I spent a whole day with the crew in mission control in an integrated sim back last year.
Did you speak up a little bit there?
Yeah, and so looking forward to seeing them finally get into space. It's been a long time. They've trained for about 8 years, actually. This crew.
Yeah, I'm going to move the microphone a little bit closer here to you guys there as we get our mosh pit here together.
Okay.
And there, we're going to talk about you guys were at the press conference today for the maiden flight of a human spacecraft built by Boeing, the Starliner, with Sonny Williams as the pilot and Butch Wilmer as the commander, both very experienced shuttle era astronauts that have been 10 years, a better part of 7 years for sure, working on this spacecraft, John, right?
Yep, definitely.
And what's exciting, I'm going to bop out of here in a minute, but we're going to talk about the press conference, a little bit about the flight, and then we're going to talk about our auction that I'll mention here in just a moment. This Saturday, we've got an auction that helps sustain our museum. You can go to our website and find the link. I'm going to put up a slide there in a minute, but all of us collect things. And we had a question from a Stay Curious watcher yesterday. How do you know that you're really buying the real thing that they say they get? So we'll touch on that a little bit. Basically, it's kind of like buyer beware, right, guys?
Exactly.
And where you get it, and there's some little things that can tip you off that it might be a fake or forgery or something like that. But so we're gonna have fun with these guys today. I'm gonna go off camera here in a minute. You got your friend there with you, Carlton, Fodsy. All right, Fodsy's there. All right, Fodzilla on there. But I'd like to say this, that being involved with the Space Museum for 7 years, I told our executive director, Karan Conklin, that someday this museum will be a kind of a clubhouse for space geeks to come and gather up. And we've had that kind of day today. The crewed launches bring people into our region here and a lot of astronauts. I had lunch with a NASA group that included Kay Heyer this week. She's in to see her good friend Sonny Williams off. You might see Chris Ferguson getting some gas somewhere around here. He's involved with the Boeing Starliner. He was the commander and then stepped down that a few years ago. So you just don't know who you're going to see at the grocery store, at the Walmart, wherever you go. There's going to be astronauts all over. And then next week, at the end of the month, we're going to even more astronauts will be hanging out here as the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation has their Hall of Fame event that Mark Usciak here is the official photographer. I found
not
out.
the only one.
For there. Yeah, well,
shooter.
we're happy for you that. Your big brothers clapping for you there up there. And so let me get off camera here and we'll get this show started here a little bit. You guys happily chime in where you want. Let me first let's introduce John formally. John, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and the type of businesses you've been in the space industry.
Okay, so I grew up in upstate New York during the Apollo program, which was a great time to be motivated by all the developments that were happening in the space program, starting with Gemini and Apollo. It led to me coming here to actually see some of the Apollo launches, and eventually led to my academic work. I went to MIT as an undergrad and studied aeronautics and astronautics, and I've been involved in starting companies that entrepreneurial in nature, but have been transformational both in electronics and in aerospace. I decided after many years to go back to MIT and finish a PhD, which I did on the topic of flight simulation.
And you did your PhD on flight simulation, and who'd you get to talk to today? That
Jay
I'm
Honeycutt.
sure was a nice thrill for you.
Yeah, so that was part of the enjoyment of doing this dissertation, which is I interviewed over 80 people that worked in the history of flight simulation, mostly at NASA on programs like Gemini and Apollo. And Jay Honeycutt was one. He was one of the simulation supervisors that helped train the mission control team during Apollo. I had a chance to interview many of the astronauts that flew on the missions, but also the engineers that actually did the work. So the dissertation is really about how the technology evolved over a number of years and explaining this important element. Michael Collins from Apollo 11 called it the heart and soul of the NASA culture, but no one had ever written about it. And so this is why I picked the topic. And I happen to be, my hometown in upstate New York happens to be where Edwin Link developed the Link trainer. And then the Apollo mission simulator and lunar mission simulator were built by Link in Binghamton. So there was some history there that I also studied that aspect as well.
Jay Honeycutt was here in our building today. I'm working on a little project with him, and so glad that you could meet up with him. And he hung around today to see Mark Usciak also. Mark had a personal story I might like you to share about Mr. Honeycutt. He's really one of the hidden figures of the whole shuttle era. He helped put it on track after Challenger on the management side. But it's so cool to hear you guys talk shop, about some of the people that you interviewed that Jay knew very well, of course, in Johnson Space Center. Did you have anything to do with the book Luminary and Sun? The MIT book
Sunburst and
Luminary, the programs of command module and lunar module.
Yeah, not specifically the book, but the author Don Iles is a good friend of mine.
Good.
And he's come to our class at MIT called Engineering Apollo several times to
that's a
talk
good book to read. And our friend who passed away, Bob Pearson, was an MIT trainer that he knew all the lunar astronauts very well. And we miss Bob, but we did get some stories out of him recorded before he passed away, probably in about 2021.
Maybe should mention, while you brought it up, Don Iles, we just had a session at the MIT Museum 2 weeks ago with Don Iles and Bill Widnall, who's another one of the Apollo engineers, and it was all about the work that they did to build both the software and the hardware of the Apollo guidance computer.
It sounds like the MIT guys they're very underrated on the program.
They played
64K memory in these Desky computers that is part of the legend of the Apollo era. I want to say hi to Marty Winkle here, and we've got an intern, Logan, from Eastern Florida State University that we're cutting teeth with Marty here on there. And thank you, Marty, for all that you're doing. When I was going to have Marty make up John Tilko's name on the bottom, I was just going to have Marty put he's the smartest guy in our studio.
I don't think so.
Probably the building, okay, because Mr. Honeycutt left. But no, it's great to make your friendship from breaking bread with you at Zorella's a few years ago to having you on our show here.
Thank you.
Dave Stengy's got a question. What is each of your first memory of America's space program? Your first memory. So let's start with CB, Carlton Bailey over here. What were you in the cradle kicking the slats when John Glenn went up, or?
I evidently in second grade, I did a little blurb for the second grade newsletter about how the astronauts were training at Wallops. And I think the first actual real experience I had was was in first or second grade, and we were outside the school grounds, and I knew what time Alan Shepard was going to be launching. And little me, I'm up in Virginia, and I knew, and I looked at the clock, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's time for him to launch, and I was convinced I was going to be able to see the launch from Virginia.
Huh.
I didn't, but that didn't stop me from pursuing and eventually meeting Alan Shepard a couple times and getting to talk to him. And but actually looking up into space at the time that Alan Shepard was launching was my first real recollection that I know of.
Well, that had been in
61.
we're going to be celebrating it May 5th, 1961 here is Alan Shepard's launch, if I'm not mistaken, a couple days from now. How about you there, Mr. Mark
Whoa.
Usciak?
Well, I can remember, I guess it was National Geographic or Life magazine photographs taken on board the Gemini, especially the spacewalk shots.
Yeah.
That's as far as first memory. I think that was probably it. I mean, I can remember staying home watching the moonwalk and stuff on TV and over the summer in July. But the first, I think it was the pictures I saw in printed magazines, which are going by the way of the Goonie Bird. But there's still a few magazines that are out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, a few. If y'all remember what a magazine is. So, and we've got Tommy Usciak saying hello to my brother CB and Dr. Tilko, also known as my friend John. So glad that you're watching. Gary Gerald's watching up in Georgia, and
Peanuts.
Lisa Marie Lehey, hello from Tampa. Is that a friend of you all's?
Yep.
Lisa Marie, okay. And
mom
Connie
passes.
McDaniel says hello, Fodsy, and oh, you other people too.
Yep.
So you owe her, okay? All three of you owe her.
Yes, we do.
Big time. I think she's going to eat that reward tonight.
Tilko owns.
So, how about your first memory of the space?
Well,
age?
you know, it's really interesting what Mark said, because I do remember the Gemini flights, but I think that Life magazine that came out with the pictures of Ed White walking in space, pictures taken by Jim McDivitt, really kind of brought home the what was happening. Prior to that, it had just been capsules, and it wasn't, you really didn't see the astronauts, but that first spacewalk in June of 1965. I had the chance recently to go up to the University of Michigan, which did a symposium to honor Jim McDivitt, who passed away about a year ago in the fall. And
Before he passed away?
well, this was this was in his memory.
Oh, gotcha.
But yeah, I talked a little bit about how I had gotten to meet him several times, but McDivitt took all of those pictures of Ed White, and they're pretty remarkable for a very short EVA. That was a 20-minute spacewalk, but some of the best photos.
It is, and most iconic, and you can buy those images on our auction. The actual photographs made in the Johnson Space Center laboratories are available on the auction. I think I even have a few of them on there. Marty, Dave Stangy wanted to hear from you, but I'm also going to chime in there that I've got to say, watching Walt Disney's Wonderful World on Sunday night when Von Braun was on there and did the whole space thing on there, I'm pretty sure I got turned on about age 8 years old to space back then. Let's see, Marty. Let's see. They had radio back when you were young, but television?
We had TV also.
Oh, did you? Okay. I just want.
But this kind of makes me feel old because these guys don't remember Sputnik and I do.
Oh, I remember Sputnik.
Yeah.
And that should have been your first.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I'm also a senior and I forget.
Well, thank you all for watching. I'm watching here. We've got from Bert Dick, our friend
Hey,
at the
Bert.
National Space Society. Hi guys, I just want to say hello. Any thoughts on the significance of the crew flight test? Is it only the first It is only the first flight of a crewed spacecraft in more than 60 years of human space flight. And we're going to get into that here real quickly there, Bert, with their opinions about it. We'll hold off on that. And we've got Jamal T's got, he's wanting to know more about some of the hurdles of the Apollo crews and so forth. And maybe we'll touch that. Thank you for Jamal for your input there. Bennett Scarborough saying howdy from North Carolina.
Hey, Ben.
And we got Michael Makowitz on here and Tom Celentano. I think you all know Tom from he used to go to that Space Fest thing that you all are eat up with, but now we're eat up with Shuttle Fest, right?
There you go.
Let's show a picture here to tell you all that our auction does keep our doors open. We're very grateful to Chuck Jeffrey and his Bid Again Auctions for doing this. This is a 30-second auction, and we're going to show you some details about that. But you can go up to our website, hit this QR code, and you can bid right now of what you'd pay for these wonderful rare NASA photographs. And keep in mind that NASA photographs are now considered serious artwork by art directors and designers and so forth. So get something, get it framed and adorn your walls, and we know some people will look at it there. But let's get to this Artemis, and I'll have Mark, you talk here. You took these pictures. What was the press conference all about?
Well,
today?
this is pretty much hot off the press. I took this today about 12:30, about 1 o'clock, I guess. This was over at the auditorium at the press site at Launch Complex 39 press site. This was, of course, Bill Nelson, the NASA's administrator, and the rest of the people up there, the different program managers for this upcoming flight. And the guy on the end is the most important. He's the one that everybody looked to and was smiling the most. He's the weatherman.
Oh, really?
And he's given us a 95% chance of acceptable weather for the launch on the 6th.
Well, that'll bring some people from Orlando traveling over here to see
Yep.
that 10:32, 10:33 launch, something
Somewhere.
like that.
10:38.
10:38 Monday night, and is instantaneous, right,
Right.
guys? They can't
Yeah.
have a delay or be pushed back the next day or two.
Yep.
Well, you got some great pictures there.
I don't. John probably knows the other guys' names. you know.
Well, Bill
course,
Nelson
Bill
on the
Nelson.
left, Steve Stitch from NASA, and I forget the woman's name. She's the ISS science payload
Okay.
program.
So they were taking questions from members of the audience there at the press site, but then also had a call in so people could dial in the number, and then folks from all over, news people from all over the country were submitting questions to ask any one of the panel members. So it went really well.
Mr. Bill Nelson there, of course, not a gray hair in sight on that head of his, but he flew in January 1986 and he admits he was not truly an astronaut. He was a space flight participant, and I admire him for making that distinction of his career there.
Mm.
He and Jake Garn basically said, we're congressmen, we want to go up and see what this is all about. When we thought we were going to send Dan Rather up there, Pablo Casals, a celloist and artist, and then 3 weeks or just about a week after, 2 weeks after Nelson and that crew landed, we had the 51L disaster. So that all went by the wayside. But there you are, Mr. Tilko, Dr. Tilko. What was your question?
Wow, I didn't think anyone took a photo of me
Oops.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I was asking about the now with the new capability of Starliner, NASA's still only planning one launch per year of Starliner, one launch per year of Dragon to ISS, and a logical extension of that is why not more flights? Makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, to get more crews to orbit. if the ISS capacity is limited, then there would be shorter duration missions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the cadence of these flights is really important from a standpoint of the launch teams, the spacecraft teams, and flying more frequently than once per year in the case of Starliner or Dragon. Now Dragon is also flying these commercial flights that adds to the capability. But I think it's something worth considering. I kind of got the answer I expected, which is NASA has not really been considering doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But the time delays on launches, particularly Artemis, is really a topic that's being discussed by some of the boards that review NASA, because when you're only launching once every 2 or 3 years, it's a very long time in between missions.
Well, the word that you brought up, John, cadence, that's an important thing, I think, in today's space age. We saw another SpaceX launch last night, and it was beautiful. I was on the beach. What a gorgeous launch that was. Actually saw the first stage ignite from 200 miles away over the ocean. And that's what everybody's talking about. The cadence of this Falcon 9 launched every 3 days. They have got this thing just grooved right down the center, man. It's particularly those of you that seen a lot of launches. The colors are predictable of how the flame looks, that turquoise flame right before it goes out. I love looking at that. And Marty Winkle here, you had a cadence of about every 4 to 5 months we were going to the moon, and not every other year type of thing. And I think this is something that United Launch Alliance has been bit several times on their delays. It's just not the crew cadence, but the launch pads. They're exposed to salt air and the harsh environment of the Atlantic Ocean. And sometimes the United Launch Alliance has had these fittings on different fueling stations not go bad, and they've had a delay to fix them and so forth like that. I've heard the old timers critical of that you have to almost every 3 months put the launch pad through its rigors to keep it primed and alive. Any comment on that, guys?
Well, to put it in perspective, it took me 35 years to get up to, say, 600 launches. And now these people that are starting now probably have 600 launches under their belt in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
It's just, I stopped counting at 625, and one of these days I said, well, I probably maybe up around 700, and I was already past 700, closer to 750. So yeah, the cadence before was you might get 15 or 20 a year, and now you're getting 15 or 20 a month. I had an advertisement that I helped Boeing with back in the day. It said 2 launches, 2 coasts, 3 days, no problem. Now I was telling Mark last night, we watching this thing go up. It's like 2 launches, 2 coasts, 2 hours.
Yeah.
So.
But if you go back to, we were talking about Gemini and Apollo. So in Gemini, there were 10 manned flights over 20 months.
I hear you,
On
man.
average,
As a teenager,
60
it was
days.
so exciting.
60 days between each mission. In Apollo, we launched 5 Saturn V's between December 68 and November of 69. The plan was if 11 and 12 had not gotten to the surface, 13 would have launched that year as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, those were being launched at a cadence of about 60-day centers. That's a different type of philosophy that NASA had in human spaceflight. Now is motivated by the race to the moon, and certainly the resources were tremendous that were allocated to the programs, but it's worth noting now in shuttle, I think we peaked at about 8 launches in one year. But the shuttle took an enormous effort to turn around on one flight where they came back early due to fuel cell problem, flew the entire exact configuration again. I think it was STS 83 and 94, yeah, and that took 90 days. That was the absolute minimum that they ever got to on turnaround time of the shuttle.
A lot of that's attributed to the gentleman we were talking to today, Mr. Jay Honeycutt, who the shuttle processing went from 1.5 million hours to about 1 million people hours under his tutelage as not the director of Kennedy Space Center, but as manager of the shuttle program with his good friend Bob Seek and Bob Lang and a whole bunch of other great people there. And I've just learned this by, hanging around with these people. It's great.
And turning the infrastructure around as well,
Yeah.
to get it ready for another launch.
Well, we're using Mark's beautiful VAB shot that you took today, and you got some, looks like an osprey out there,
Nice.
or a seahawk or osprey out there taking residence up there.
Yep.
In there. Beautiful day. You of course live in Pennsylvania, and we are waiting for you to. We're waiting for interest rates to drop so you can buy a home here.
There you go.
But I know it's always a great feeling for you to come here. It's like a second home to
It is.
you out
Yep.
there. What is the press corps like for this out there? I saw the room look pretty full.
It was. I think it was pretty much the fullest I've seen in a press conference, like pre-launch press conference, in a long time. Our first photo event is tomorrow. The rocket's being rolled out from its assembly building to the launch pad. So that's our first time that we'll be shooting pictures of, and I'll get a chance to see how many guys are there.
So it's only going to be out there a little over 48 hours.
Right.
So weather's supposed to be perfect. No chance of any weather affecting this. By the way, John Ullman
Hey,
said
John.
hi from North Carolina to Mark and company while sitting there.
Yep.
We're enjoying a special conversation with Mr. Carlton Bailey on the left and Dr. John Tilko in the middle and Mark Usciak on the right. And once again, we always thank you for all three of you saying good things about our American Space Museum and our efforts to preserve the birth of America's space age right here on its hallowed grounds of Brevard County, Florida. So let's talk about what Mr. Burt Dick of the National Space Society is asking you all guys. The historic significance of this flight. After all, this is only the sixth crewed spacecraft in 60 years to have a maiden flight. This one did have an uncrewed, actually two uncrewed flights. We talked about that yesterday. There is the unique Atlas V rocket to set this up 61 years ago on May 15th, 1963. This gentleman, the late Mr. Gordon Cooper, flew an Atlas rocket to space, as did his astronaut Mercury buddies John Glenn, Wally Schirra, and Scott Carpenter. So 61 years later, Atlas V, N-22 technically, crewed rated, and I love this juxtaposition of 6 decades. And of course, Gordon Cooper's the last human to ever fly solo in space, except the Chinese. The first 2 Chinese guys went solo.
Okay.
So I was trying to think of who was in there. And of course, then we had the solo catastrophe of Komarov on that maiden flight of a Soyuz. So comment on Bert's observation here of how historic this actually is.
I don't remember it. I was just a little guy, but yeah, it should be fun. I mean, I had the privilege and pleasure of actually meeting Sonny, one of the crew members on this flight, about 4 years ago. I was flying to Houston to photograph Jack Lousman's birthday party, and I was sitting in the waiting area of Baltimore Airport, and I look over and I see her on her phone, and I didn't go over and bother her, but we were in the same boarding group, and we ended up sitting beside each other on the plane and struck up a conversation. And she was scheduled, I think back then, to fly, I think that following year, or if not that year. And I made a promise to her then. I told her, I was showing her pictures on my phone, and I promised her then that I was going to photograph her launch, and so I'm just keeping my end of the bargain.
That's
So,
awesome.
yep.
Yes, what an amazing astronaut she is, and Wilmer too. Both are test pilots. I was corrected by Kay Hire that they've not been spinning their wheels. They've been working their butts off on this maiden space flight to make sure the spacecraft will function the way it's supposed to. And Wilmer even gave a cautionary tale of like, we're going to have some issues. All right, this is why it's a maiden flight.
Sure.
But also, John, why don't you tell us how uniquely this spacecraft's going to land?
Well, it's going to land on land with airbags, more like the approach that the Russians use.
Mhm.
They use a retro rocket that fires just above the surface to slow down that final impact. By the way, that quote from your previous question, that 6 applies to American spacecraft. So it's more like the 10th, I think, if you include the 3 versions of Russian spacecraft, Vostok, Voskhod, and Soyuz, and
There
if
you
you
go.
include the Shenzhou, which the Chinese use. So
There you go.
this would be the 10th crewed spacecraft flying for the first time.
Good point,
It's,
John. When do you think India's going to fly? a crewed
soon.
flight?
I think
they're
within
on the
a
cusp of that, aren't they?
yeah, within a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, this morning at 5:37 a.m., the Chinese successfully launched a vehicle that will fly to the moon's far side and return samples.
Yes.
So quite an accomplishment. It's not the mission's in progress now, so it's not yet a success, but launched this morning and it's on its way to the moon. And the Chinese program is extremely capable. And I think it's gonna give us some challenges here.
Well, are we in a new moon race with China that's sort of undeclared?
In some ways, yes. We're certainly competing with China. We're also cooperating in some level with China, but I think it's giving some of the actual political support to Artemis because key members of the Congress see it as a competition, and Bill Nelson and others have worked that pretty hard to build support for Artemis on multiple levels, bipartisan support, not just Nelson, but James Bridenstine and others who, his predecessor, who basically made this a bipartisan program, which was, essentially Apollo was also bipartisan. It got support across both parties in Congress. That's essential if you want to have a successful program in the United States.
Well, there's some people say it's a national security issue that we have a ramped up Artemis program as China is going to the moon. They've printed posters. They've named their space vehicles. And a week ago, they launched 2 satellites to be in way outside the orbit of the moon so that they can talk to their spacecraft that's landed on the backside.
Right.
We don't have that infrastructure in there that we need yet.
We don't. I mean, we were talking earlier about the unmanned spacecraft that landed on the surface that was developed by Intuitive Machines.
You're right.
They did not use the NASA tracking network. They did not have the advantage of spacecraft in orbit around the moon. They came up with their own ground-based systems to communicate with the spacecraft. So we need more infrastructure in that regard to make the Artemis program successful.
We sure do. I don't even see, any draft tables full of ideas on there. It's just kind of cart before the horse, I think, in many ways. Let's just look at a couple pictures here of this historic launch of Gordon Cooper on May 15th, 63 years ago. I mean, it's 1963, 61 years ago. I'm trying to spit out. Gosh, look at that kerosene, that flame, and those Werner thrusters on that Atlas rocket there. And then with Gordo on top of that, the escape
Looks so
tower.
Primitive.
Huh?
Looks primitive compared to
Yeah,
what
yeah.
we
It
have
looks like
now.
a caveman rocket there. Stubby little thing there. And then here's the launch of the Saturn Atlas V with the uncrewed mission 2 years ago in May 2022 on there, and you're going to have remote cameras set up in this vicinity there, Mark, and in
All three of
Carlton?
us.
All three of you there.
Yep.
All right. Well, we can't wait. We'll be sharing those photos on Tuesdays. Stay Curious program and on our YouTube channel. By the way, Steve Jokums up there at the Lake County Spaceport on the shores of Lake Michigan, he says, great panel today. So thank you, Steve, for watching. And it is a great panel. Anytime, kind of days I like where we can just have some real experts in their field share their knowledge. So there's the 61 years ago and what we're going to hopefully see on Monday night there. So
Before you leave the picture of Gordon Cooper and that flight, I'll just point out in the book, The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe, you know, he was sort of looking at writing a longer history of the early space program. He had come to some of the Apollo launches and was trying to put together a more complex history, but he actually decides to end The Right Stuff on that flight, and it's kind of a very fitting in both the book and the movie, Gordon Cooper's flight as the final American launch. Now, by the way, there were Americans flying spacecraft solo. Dave Scott on Apollo 9, Michael Collins on Apollo 11, John Young on Apollo 10. They all flew solo flights in significant duration, but Gordon Cooper was the last launched, and Tom Wolfe, in sort of chronicling the space race, decided to use that as the concluding point of his book.
Well, one other thing strikes my memory banks here is on this launch, we had our good friend Chris Calley's dad, the great Paul Calley artist, was making sketches of this as one of the first 8 artists that the great administrator James Webb allowed on the campus of Kennedy Space Center, because he thought we needed more than just you celluloid freaks of photographers there to record it. We needed sketch artists. We needed oil paint people there and so forth. So
this was the first time that happened.
Yeah. So shout out to you, Chris, and honoring your dad on this historic day of an Atlas rocket that's going to launch humans up there.
In addition to Paul Calley, Robert McCall was here to record his impressions of that launch, and among them he did.
A guy named Hurd, I think, was there.
There were several artists that were invited as part of this original. In fact, the guy that created that whole NASA art program, James Dean, just recently passed away.
Okay.
But
I read his name. There's a beautiful book about the whole thing.
Yeah.
That you all need to have. So
McCall did illustrations for of Gordon Cooper getting into the Mercury spacecraft, and they appeared in Boy's Life magazine later that year in 1963.
Boy's Life magazine.
Yeah.
Wow. I could that in the Weekly Reader showing up in the summertime. Was like a monumental day, right, baby boomers?
Yeah.
All right, well, we're just about talking about that. We've got to give you the crew there. There's Butch Wilmer, Barry's his real first name, and Sonny Williams, and that's Spanky between them there.
Mike Fink.
Yeah, Mike Fink, nicknamed Spanky. He's the backup. If they would, God forbid, anything happen the next 2 days to get sick, but Spanky was kind of his days on the space station, he was a real media star in the early days of social media. He really went to great pains to explain things on the ISS. So you guys met Finky? Fink?
I have.
Yeah.
He came up to talk. He's an MIT grad. He came up to talk at MIT recently. Then I spent time with him when I was in that integrated sim. He's going to be flying on the next Starliner flight.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and so
Okay.
he's been in training, pretty much has done parallel training with this crew. And you were mentioning it's a test flight. You know, the significance of that is these astronauts are actually contributing to the design of the spacecraft and the design of the procedures that are going to be used as they develop those primarily in simulation. So it's the role of the test pilot in aerospace is significant, and it's not just getting to fly for the first time. It's really the development of the vehicle, the interfaces, the human centric design. This vehicle looks the flight instrument configurations looks kind of like a hybrid between what you see on Dragon, which is highly automated, and what you saw on Shuttle, which was very manual. This is sort of a much more capable manual system where the crew will have a chance to fly the vehicle with manual techniques in addition to its autonomy capability.
Well, some things don't change. Those consoles in the back are the same consoles that were used in the suit room for this is the same suit room for the Apollo astronauts. You just don't need to change some things there. We don't need no stinking LED. We'll just use these dials here. They work just fine, right?
Analog.
Good insight, guys. Of course, we wish Godspeed to this wonderful crew, and it's about a 10-day mission up there. I think they're going to spend about a day getting up there, and so we hope that things work out just well as we need it. We need to back up to the Crew Dragon. Let's face it, Crew Dragon's up for sale. You got money to buy a flight, like Jared Isaacman. You go ahead and book your flight on there. So. Any final thoughts and anticipation? Like you said, there's a big media core out there, as there should well be.
Yep, we've got rocket rollout tomorrow, and then we have the crew walk. We have to set our remotes Sunday,
Sunday
and
afternoon.
then we've got the crew walkout, and then the launch. So we'll be in the press site, and weather's going to be good. So I think everything will work out pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good.
It does feel good, doesn't it? And it'll be beautiful. And I've not figured out where I'm going to watch it, but when you live like just 15 miles away from the pad, wherever we go, we're going to see it on there. So follow it with us, and we'll be posting some of these pictures over the weekend as Mark shares them with me on there. So good luck, guys, and hope you have a great experience out there. I guess I'll ask this question. Did Jean bring her cookies today? Or the Ken and Jean Kramer? I think
they're not here.
Oh, Ken Kramer and Jean Wright are great friends.
They are
in there,
up at the Smithsonian in Virginia.
Okay.
Jean's got a book signing at the Udvar Hazy Center. Ken, if you're watching this tape delay, or has been sending me some pictures of their travels. He's gonna scoot back as quick as he can and make it back for the launch.
All right.
So I think he's the only guy that I know that's begging for a delay.
I figured Bill Nelson had his pockets of his sport jacket filled with G's delicious cookies to take back to
That
Washington.
would have tasted pretty good today. We missed you guys.
Well, guys, let's segue into something that is, of course, dear to our heart, is collecting. There'll be a lot of one-off collections of this Starliner launch, of course, but you've all participated in our launches. This particular program, our 32nd is very heavy in flat stuff, photographs, actual photographs that come out of the labs of Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, where we've got a lot of Voyager images and such from unmanned spacecraft. Of course, Johnson Space Center with the Apollo pictures that you can buy, like I show here, and even the John Hopkins Hubble Telescope Institute, where we've got some things on that. But we had a guest watcher yesterday ask, how do you know you're buying the real thing? And how do you know these are authentic space items and so forth? And well, like we both know, ask these two guys. Okay, there's Chuck Jeffrey and Ken Havicott. Ken Havicott has spent his lifetime since in high school collecting astronaut autographs, and he is without a doubt one of the world premier experts in all things space. And Chuck Jeffrey, mentored by Ken, and then Chuck's mentored me. I know just enough to be dangerous about it, but
I tell
so-
people that
so
Ken's,
speak about that. You know, buying things, of course, is buyer beware.
I tell people that if Ken's the best one that I know. Anybody should know. Ken's the guy that the astronauts go to when they want things from their mission. So you get it from Ken. Ken will give you all the kind of authentications you need. When I need something, or if I've ever had, will you check something out for me? He's the one I go to. I've known him for over 30 years, and I met Ken through Mark and Tom.
I'll put they're up there. Bid Again Auctions has a website, and though he's one of the world's experts, he's one of the most humble guys you want. Ken Havicott doesn't even have a website, but he is on Collect Space a lot. You all know Mr. Robert Perlman and his excellent Collect Space website, and that's what fuels it there. And you can go to their forums and so forth, and Ken's on there a lot, and you can contact him, either one of these gentlemen directly, or get a hold of the museum. And on our website, we've got a link to Chuck's phone number and everything. He does, both these gentlemen do free appraisals here on the coast. We've even handled some things remotely. I'll never forget a gentleman from St. Louis said that he wanted to had some items from McDonnell Douglas, that built the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft. And lo and behold, he sent Chuck a hand controller out of a Gemini trainer that had all the wires on it and everything that he fished out of the neighbor's trash bag. And with the neighbor's permission, he was allowed to take that. We sold that controller for over $30,000.
Wow.
And at our auctions, you get a very fair take. It's way over 60%. And then the museum gets some and the auction house gets some. But you make your own deal there. Here's some of the things that we have to offer. When I say some beautiful photographs, there's 11 by 14, 16 by 20s, and a lot of 8 by 10s. We're looking at some Viking orbiter spacecrafts of the planet Mars there. Here's some other Ranger. That is one of the moons of Saturn from the Voyagers. These are actual photographs that scientists drooled over, looking at some of these are even the early telemetry photos on there. And guys, talk about how can you tell you got a real photograph from the 1970s. What's one of the first things you look for?
The backs usually have Kodak.
The watermark
The
on the back.
watermark.
Yeah. A Kodak paper is up to 1970, 71, and then it says Kodak paper after that. But there's watermarks on the back. Now, some of the early ones might not have watermarks out of the Cape Canaveral. That'd be
Right.
your AGFA paper, and Ilford sometimes didn't have watermarks on it. But you can tell that it's a 50 or 60-year-old.
A lot of the earlier ones had different printing on the back from the lab,
Right.
as opposed to a reissue, which would have the same information but might not have the meatball. It might not. It's a different printing process.
Right.
So it would definitely
A
be.
lot of Space Force, what we call it today, have stamped on the back. You'll have hand stamps, and then of course there's a mimeograph machine that put blueprint on the back of all the Apollo and Mercury and Gemini flights on there. But how would you like to own one of the most famous photographs ever taken of our Mercury heroes there? That one on the upper left of that, we have it on the wall here in our gallery as you come in, showing them in front of the, is that the, what's that jet? Is that the F-86, F-86?
Is that a,
Would that be
I think
Is that
it's
an
I think
F-106?
it's one of the Century Series fighters, but I'm not sure.
104?
Yeah,
Is
it
it
might be a one. It
104?
might be a 104.
And how about President
they-
Kennedy's famous visit to the Kennedy Space Center with Werner von Braun, and there you got Davis and von Braun, and there's Mr. Kennedy here. I've never seen either one of those 3 photographs of him there. So you can own these and do with them whatever you want. And let's see here. I'm looking for any more comments. There's the famous Ed White photographs taken by Jim McDivitt,
Yep.
who, I'll tell you, he did some of the best space photography with that Nikon film camera there. He did take his time to take some of the greatest photographs ever. There's a photograph of the gas controller that we used above Carlton's head there. I believe that's Michael Collins, or it could be Gordon Cooper riding.
Wasn't Cooper.
Pardon me?
You're talking on the
Yeah.
Agena spacecraft?
Yes, the genus, just above Carlton's head there.
Dick Gordon.
It could have
That's
been
probably
Dick.
Dick Gordon.
Yeah, it could have been Dick Gordon.
F-106, Marty said, is that jet there. F-1, thank you for
Delta Dagger, right, Marty?
And by the way, it wasn't.
Michael Mikowski
Delta
corrected me on that.
I
Thank
think
you,
that- I
Michael.
think that's what.
And I don't think those were Nikon photos. I think those were Hasselblads that were used on Gemini 4.
Okay. No, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the reasons.
Tommy
that,
Usciak knows for sure, probably, but
Yeah.
I thought that's too bulky.
see if-
at the time.
No, yeah, the square
Yeah,
image.
you got the square image. That's right. That does tip it off. You're right.
70 millimeter.
That
film.
even makes it more stout because that's a hard camera to even handle on Earth
Well,
to trigger.
you got to remember, he has a helmet on.
Yeah.
Plus, he's holding that camera up that little window. He didn't
Yeah.
open his hatch. They
Yeah.
didn't open the hatch to shoot those.
Right, and that was before they had the motorized version too.
Yeah, so he had to sit
Needs
back,
to go hand cranking the
crank it, and push the lens up
The
against
gloves
the
on.
window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim McDivitt, one of my space heroes for sure. God rest his soul. Here's a couple other looks. Yes, we got a lot of Apollo ones. There'll be some that'll be faded out that'll even go for some money. You got the Lem there in the upper right. How you want to own one of the most famous photographs on the moon of Gene Cernan with the flag and the Earth in the background there? You can own that, and should go for a couple $100 easy. And then you take it to your framer and spend $100 putting a beautiful frame, and everyone will look at it on your wall there at your office or whatever. You even got Comet Kahootek there taken on Skylab mission there. So those are the last photographs I've got there to show, guys.
Buying through the museum here in an auction like that, you know that you guys are legitimate. So you know you're getting something legitimate. It's like my mom, your parents always say, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. The best place to look is like, and I think buy from a reputable dealer, buy from somebody you know, or somebody a reputable dealer suggests. My brother went to a convention one day, and this guy was signing things and everything with the certificate of authenticity. The booth next to this was a guy selling 100 packs of certificate of authenticities. So just because you get one of those doesn't mean you're getting anything other than that certificate of authenticity is authentic. So if it looks too good to be true, ask somebody before you buy it. Ken, that we mentioned, and Chuck, I don't think they'd have any problem. A lot of people are on eBay, and a lot of people don't know the difference between an autograph and an auto pen.
Right.
And they'll just, and they won't differentiate. And they might know it's an auto pen, but they'll list it as astronaut autograph, which technically it is. And people will see this and go like, "Oh, look, it's a Neil Armstrong autograph for $39.95." And technically it is, but it's an auto pen, and
$1,000 too cheap.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if it sounds
Now, auto
too good-
pen, those of you under 40 years old, a lot of famous people, including actors and politicians, have their name signed by a machine that mimics their their exact signature, but usually you can see where the pen lifted up and off. You're looking for some flaring. You're looking where the astronaut lifted up there. Now, I've kind of gotten familiar with what some of the astronaut autographs look like, particularly the Apollo and Gemini and Mercury guys. And so I actually got a book at a book sale for $1. The Alan Shepard book. What am I saying?
Moonshot.
Moonshot. And I looked at it, and it was signed by Alan Shepard there, but it looked crowded. His signature it wasn't spread out like I'm usually there. And I got to see Ken Havocott about a day later, and I showed him that, and he says, "Yep, that's real." And I go, "But it doesn't look as elongated." He goes, "That's a good eye, Mark," because Shepard hated to sign books. He made his autograph shorter so it could do it quicker. And then you see Neil Armstrong's autograph over his career changed, all right? A lot of them will change it because they realize what demand it is and they want to shorten it and make it quicker on there. So there's a lot of different things to look at with the autographs, but you know what? You can snap a picture of it and send it to these experts. We haven't mentioned Mr. Zarelli. You familiar with Zarella? Not Zarella, but Zarelli, right? The autograph.
Steve, right?
Steve Zarella.
Yeah.
He will authenticate things. I'm not saying he does it for free, because some of these people deserve to make a living off their expertise on there. You've got other auction houses of repute. Name a few of them that.
R&R auctions.
Yeah.
Up in
R&R,
Boston.
Heritage. Another one. So you go to these real auction houses because they don't want to get caught selling fakes, but they have. And there was a whole cottage industry, I understand, of fake patches to authenticate a space-flown crude patch of an Apollo astronaut. That's something way out of my bailiwick, but Chuck knows them very well, Chuck Jeffrey. And there's a space patch site. I can't remember the gentleman that it's an outstanding site to go to space patches, and he really details not only what they look like, but the last one sold and how much they were sold for. So
Well, we had lunch today with Tim Gagnon.
oh, did you? Okay.
He saw us. We were up at the so we'll say hey Tim.
Hi, Tim.
I did.
He was sitting. We went to Sonny's over at the VAB cafeteria
Okay.
before the press conference, and John and I were walking there, and he comes over. I didn't see him at first. He came over and said, "Hey," and he's accredited for the launch too. So we'll see him up at the press site.
Oh, good, good. The
launch.
patch guy.
Patch
He
guy.
created our now iconic shuttle patch on there, and all right. So I'm looking like I wanted to get I don't see any more questions out here, except I did want to review. All right, Tom says, I knew Tommy would have the answer. They used a Hasselblad 500C on Gemini 4.
Yep.
All right, and I actually own it.
He's
I-
watching from home.
I own
Thanks,
that,
Tom.
I own that very camera and all 3 lenses at one time.
I will be putting out Hasselblads at the remote sites
Oh,
if there's time.
If there's time.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky now.
Guys, let's be fair to one of our questions here. He wanted to know, what anecdote do you have about a particularly cunning or technical varmint that plagued Apollo? Any anecdotes about Apollo that was kind of a lost in space history of
Varmints.
Well, not really, but there is a whole lineage of animals in space, beginning with Laika that was launched, on the Sputnik 2 by the
right?
Russians. We had bio satellite with a whole series of biological experiments that was launched in the late 60s, kind of contemporary with Apollo. But the program was cut short after like 1 or 2 flights. Obviously,
they took some stuff up in Skylab, some bees and things, didn't they?
yeah. One of the student projects in Skylab was a spider that
Spider web building.
Yeah, Arabella and
Arabella.
Anita
Yeah.
were the spiders up there.
Yeah.
So, all
So
kinds
there's
of things.
been things in space.
Great question. I think I'll end our little conversation before I jump in here with something that Marty brought to me the other day, Marty.
Yep.
What do Gaylord Perry, the great knuckleball Hall of Fame pitcher, have in common with Apollo 11?
Oh, that's a great question. Was he pitching at the time when
That's
when
close.
they were on the moon?
That's a close one here. And
Well, he's known for spitball, so
right. Well, here it is, guys.
Okay.
Marty, Marty brought this in. He's a baseball fan of history like me and some of us. In 1962, Perry took batting practice before his second big league career start. This was in Pittsburgh. Standing behind Gaylord Perry in the batting cage was his San Francisco manager, Alvin Dark, along with a colorful sports reporter and saloon keeper named Harry Juniper. Dark was looking at something else when Perry hit a long fly ball. Jupiter was impressed. He said, "Hey, Al, look, this one might be a hitter instead of a pitcher." Dark looked up, and he's a famous manager, Alvin Dark, and player for Cleveland Indians. But
The Giants.
he's also in the Indians, though, and Giants. Shook his head. Dark shook his head and said, "Perry, nah, that one's got no power. We'll have a man on the moon before he hits a home run." Sure enough, for the first 7 years of his career, 547 times he came to plate, Perry did not hit a single home run. Then on a warm Sunday afternoon in Los Angeles, Perry started against the Dodgers. The date was July 20th, 1969, at 1:17 Pacific time, 17 minutes after the Dodgers game started. Perry gave up 3 runs to the Dodgers in the first inning, and Apollo 11 landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Later in the game, Perry stepped up to the plate against Dodgers' Claude Osteen. On the first pitch, Perry hit a long fly ball to center field, and it sailed over the fence for his first home run. He hit it exactly 34 minutes after Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon.
Very good.
So there's some great trivia there for you guys. Let me go in here to end that. Marty, I knew I'd be able to work that in there this week. So thank you, buddy.
Well done.
Thank you,
Well
John
done.
Tilco. Thank you for being here and
Sure.
adding so much
Yeah.
to our museum and
Thank you.
talking about our museum just like this guy CB does. We talk about you almost every day. So here is the man, the legend, Carlton Bailey, straight from his menagerie out there at
All right.
Canaveral Grove.
Talk about critters, right?
Talk about
You've got the varmints right
one of
here.
the varmint critters is here today.
So we hope that you've all enjoyed this discussion here. Mark Usciak, thank you for all you do to share with you and your brother your wonderful photography with us. And I wish I'd racked up CB shot a really great streak shot that I'll put up afterwards here. But we've been kind of busy today. Just like I said, I love it. You can tell a human space flight's happening on the coast. We're abuzz with it. We got great friends in our museum today to
Jay
share
Honeycutt.
that, including Mr. Jay Honeycutt. Thank you, Jay, for always wanting to support our museum.
Good to talk to you, Jay.
And absolutely. So,
Thanks for the
Good point.
picture, Jay.
so guys, let's take it out together with me. You know my tagline is we're gonna say Godspeed to Sonny and Butch. I hope they have a nominal mission and a perfect launch of that Atlas V. And we'll be talking all about it next week because I'm Mark Marquette. And what, guys, we can't wait to see you to bridge the space between us.
Very
Thank
good.
y'all.